GNASS. Two degenerates, both sides of the border. John Santino, Alex Lacasse. The Great North American Sports Show. Welcome into another edition of GNASS. We are hitting the ice as the NHL playoffs have begun. Alex, are you excited to hit the barn for this time of year?
I will do my best, though I never quite figured out the how to stop. So that's why I never really made it far as a hockey player. But yes, John, two shows, two special editions of GNAS, as it's the NHL playoff preview show, as John mentioned. This is John's time to shine, people, as our in-house hockey expert.
Putting a lot of pressure on me.
The man from the Great White North, as all of you up there were born on skates, or so I've been told. So John's here to tell you who's going to be hosting Lord Stanley's Cup in just 2 months' time, and I'll chime in at least to make fun of the Maple Leaf. Speaking of John,
wow, you pick on the easy target, bud. Pick on the easy target.
Speaking of John, 7-2 beat down.
7-3, but yeah.
Oh yeah, got a garbage goal in there.
Don't forget about that consolation prize goal.
Yes. Anyways, John, is it belt and shoelaces time in Toronto?
Not quite. You know, it's really funny because a lot of people have been bringing that up. Like, they're like, "How embarrassed are you guys after that game one performance?" And I'm like, "Bitch, I'm a Maple Leafs fan. On the scale of embarrassment, this is so far down there." And it's, don't get me wrong, I'm not happy about it. Like, because it was almost like. And I heard this on like Steve Dangle when he was on Sportsnet. Like, he's like, it's like every single one of their problems like manifested in game one. And I'm hoping that's just the jitters and they can get it out. But man, it felt like the same old Leafs again in a big moment.
And we will talk about those Leafs chances of at least getting out of the first round. We got to hope for that this year.
Check out. I was gonna say, check out our GNAS article if you want. I did a quick little dive into the torturous hell that is the Toronto Maple Leafs history of the last 20 years. So
it is John's number one storyline for the first round, and but we're gonna start on the other side of this great continent, out west, John. Just overall, you've seen everybody play their game one. What are some of your just big takeaways?
I mean, the biggest one is congrats to the Seattle Kraken taking down the reigning Stanley Cup champs out west in game one. Honestly, it was a big surprise. Seattle's a scrappy team. They're very like tenacious. A lot of good depth on Seattle. They don't really have a lot of high-end superstars, like not at least that Colorado does, but great seeing them get on the board early. I'm sure a lot of people didn't have them going far against the reigning champs of all people, but great to see them jump out there, Alex.
And do you think the Avalanche are at risk of maybe taking Seattle a little lightly here and getting bounced in the first round as the defending champ? They think that they should just beat this, the newest expansion team in the league pretty handily.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're the defending champs, like, you're expected to still make a dent in the postseason, especially given the fact, like, you hear these guys like Nate McKinnon coming out and he's talking about taking a hometown discount despite the fact that he's making over 10 mil. And look, I have nothing against the Colorado Avalanche. I think they're a fantastic team, but they definitely took Seattle lightly on this one. And a little bit unspoken there, but a revenge game of sorts for Philip Grubauer, the former Avalanche starting goaltender.
Yeah, he was ostracized. They didn't protect him in the expansion draft.
Exactly. Even nominated for the Vezina, actually, with Colorado. Let him walk, signed by Seattle. And, it was just a nice little like revenge storyline. It took them twice as long as Vegas to get their first playoff win, but taken 2 years instead of one. But good to see them get on the board against the champs. But Alex, I still have Colorado winning this series because they are the champs for a reason. How are you feeling about it?
I think this could be a year where the defending champ just gets knocked off because they take a team like Seattle too lightly. And Seattle, I mean, take it for what it's worth. They played the Bruins harder than any team this season in the two games that they played together. And
Leafs played them pretty hard too, but it's close series regardless.
And so, if Seattle could get up for a game like against the Bruins, then I think they're at least dialed in and they are welcoming this challenge against the Avalanche. I can't say I've seen a lot of them play this year, so I can't really compare Colorado this year to last year. I'd say that I think Colorado could be in trouble here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get knocked off.
The biggest problem that Colorado faces is their lack of depth down the middle. Like, they had a a big problem replacing some of the offensive pieces. They lost like Nazem Kadri and ironically also another Colorado revenge game, Andre Burakovsky. But Colorado's still a strong team. Like I said, their biggest thing is going to be that hole in the number 2 center spot, and I think their biggest challenge is going to come in round 2 because I think when they take on the winner of the Minnesota Dallas series. Not that Seattle isn't a good team, but they're going to see a step up in talent because the front end talent on Seattle isn't as high, despite having the league's quietest 40 goal scorer in Jared McCann. But once they get I think that they still have a chance to make it out here. Alex, let's dive into series number 2, Minnesota versus Dallas.
Right. Yeah, that's what I wanted because coming in, I think a lot of people thought Dallas was the best team out west, and at least on paper and how they've played this season. But they lose game 1 in overtime. And Dallas they've been a little choky, and I think they've underperformed in playoff years past. So I think that like not to the extent that the Maple Leafs have experienced, but maybe they're facing the jitters too here.
A little bit for sure. I mean, like one thing with Dallas is that the last time they made the Stanley Cup run, it was a lot of their older heads kind of making that run. Like the only sort of part of this new core that was there was Miro Heiskanen, who was absolutely unbelievable during that run. But this is really like a much new Dallas core, like primarily being led by Jason Robertson and Ropa Hintze. Although I guess Ropa Hintze was there as well, like playing well in that playoff run, playing well in the playoffs, but previously. But it's a young core in Dallas, and young guys tend to struggle early in the playoffs. So we could just be seeing them hit those initial speed bumps. And one thing too with Minnesota is a team with a lot to rally behind. I mean, Billy Guerin making those big moves in the offseason, buying out some guys, like bold moves by Minnesota. And right now, like the early returns they're paying off because they might get hammered with a cap penalty in a few years, but right now this team is high flying, they're young, and Ryan Hartman, another one of those guys that they managed to keep around, grabs you the OT winner. So, Minnesota's going to be a tough out any way that you see it, but to your point out.
So do you think Dallas gets on track here and pulls the series out?
That's what I was about to say is I think Dallas does get back on track. I think that they rebound very well in game 2. And I think we're just going to see Miro Heiskanen begin to put together a nice run here for them in terms of like scoring and just being able to eat minutes like no other. And I think that's really what's going to set them apart from Minnesota is just the fact that Minnesota is in a bit of a transition phase. We saw it throughout the year. And that's why I was saying like they have a lot of momentum, great story out in Minnesota, but at some point that's going to come to an end. And I think the Dallas Stars just too much depth. And quite frankly, the divisional format kills Minnesota on this one.
Right. That's what I was going to ask. Going forward, do we want to do who's going to play out of this division, or we want to cover the other series across the bracket?
Let's go the other series first. First.
So Vegas, new coach, bring in Jack Eichel, trying to capture, the success that Bruce Cassidy, at least, regular season, and, one run of the Stanley Cup Finals had in Boston, for a team that is, since they've been in the league, they've been right there every year. Some of the pieces have changed, obviously, from their, remarkable run to the Stanley Cup Finals as an expansion team. Does it feel like now or never for Vegas?
It did entering the year, but one thing that has really been a caveat to Vegas, by the way, shout out Jack Eichel for playing your first career playoff game. Went about as well as all your games in Buffalo, unfortunately, but the issue with Vegas this year is that they are down to their third string goaltender. Hopefully, if they can make it out of round 1, Logan Thompson can end up coming in and solidifying their goaltending situation. Excuse me, Robin Leonard obviously out for the year, but with Vegas, I think that Jack Eichel can make a statement here, and if he can steal the series for Vegas, because he's going to have to drive a lot for them, just getting Mark Stone back for game 1 and having a number of injuries on their own, like I said, in net, especially like down to their third string goaltender, it's going to be a tough fight against the Winnipeg Jets team that Josh Morrissey's really stepped up the series, a Norris Trophy candidate. Connor Hellebuck, as everyone knows, is one of the few elite goalies in this league, even despite the down numbers, and a bit of a last ride too up front for this team with Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I actually have Winnipeg winning this series just because of the weird struggles with Vegas, especially in net. It's hard to trust a team without a steady goalie.
Exactly. That was you read my mind, John, because I was going to say we know in this sport a goalie can win multiple rounds of the playoffs here. And do you feel like Winnipeg at least has enough guns to be able to run with Vegas, and then maybe Hellebuck steals this from them?
I do, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. And we sort of saw the prelude to that in game one. Like the way that a lot of Winnipeg's players are, like a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois is built for playoff hockey. We've seen him play hard against guys like Austin Matthews in the past, and he's built to play a guy like Jack Eichel. Now, I do think Jack Eichel still has a big series in this one because he, like I said, he really wants this to be his introduction to the playoffs. So I think he'll still put up some points, but it's hard to see a team with their third stringer overcoming a guy like Connor Hellebuck. And yeah, it's to me, Winnipeg wins this one. How you feeling about it, Alex?
I'd probably have to side with the goalie here. I do like Vegas's talent. Petrangelo's maybe one of the top five D men in the game, at least on the right side. So I certainly respect Vegas's talent, but yeah, I'm gonna go with the goaltender here.
Yeah, it's tough with all the injuries in Vegas. Like I think if they're a healthy team, it's a different, like a 100% healthy team, it's a different story. But it's starting to shape up with this series. Like it doesn't look like some of the guys are going to make it in time, and that might ultimately be their downfall.
And yeah, so John, we'll move over to the Kings and the Oilers. Kings get a double overtime win in game one, and I think I feel like with every like crushing playoff defeat, I think the Oilers went down 3-0 last year, or was it no, that was the Flames that went down 3-0.
Flames.
Yeah. So, but I feel like with every crushing playoff defeat the Oilers have, knowing that they have the best player in the game in Connor McDavid, and from the way it's been described, the gap between McDavid's talent and the next closest player, that delta is greater than all the other three sports, like maybe even combined.
In team sports, I'd say so. Yeah.
Right. And so it just feels like with every crushing defeat that the Oilers endure in the playoffs, the pressure just builds on McDavid. And I just don't know how they like it seems their defense is a little bit steadier than in years past. So I think they take care of business here, but it's getting early late for McDavid.
It definitely feels like he might
late early.
Yeah. It definitely feels like he might be getting a little testy with management, given the fact that they haven't been able to surround him with a team. Like it's a little scary that he led the playoffs in points last year and they didn't even make the Stanley Cup final. And I think Connor McDavid's going to be back with a vengeance. And we saw it with a few rushes in the game one versus LA. He didn't capitalize on them, but just ripping apart the defense.
I was flipping around. I did touch a little of that. He just sliced through three people and oh my, and like there was a holding penalty, and
it's just how do you stop that? Like it's just there's no way to stop that. And quite frankly, like it's scary that Edmonton can't build a team around him, but I fully expect Connor McDavid to figure this out and just absolutely pop off. Like despite the great story that the LA Kings have been after their quite frankly brilliant trade at the trade deadline with Columbus Blue Jackets to get Eunice Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov, I don't think they have enough to take Edmonton down. Like I think Connor McDavid will the Oilers at least 2 rounds in this playoffs. I really do. I think he's just going to score too much. Like a guy who's on pace to put up like 50 points in the playoffs, like guys, like that's enough to get you by one series alone, and it's in 3-2, 2-1 games. So for me, I still think Edmonton figures this out, despite the fit that LA gave them in game one.
All right, so we both got the peg and the oil. Moving on, we got some good old Manitoba and Alberta,
and
Reckus up north,
and all Canada around too.
Oh, Canada, all for an entire series. Screw your national anthem, Al. Screw your national anthem, Alex. Star Spangled Banner. So John, you said that you have McDavid at least willing the Oilers through 2 rounds of the playoffs. Connor McDavid, do you think that just Winnipeg doesn't have the firepower if they do draw the Oilers next round and their goaltending is only getting them so far?
That, and I think there's a little bit of big brother here. Like I think Connor McDavid's got the Winnipeg Jets number. Like I don't have the record in front of me, but I know that that's a team that normally he has a good time with. And I personally don't think they have enough to beat Winnipeg. I also think that to a degree, despite how Winnipeg is built and the fact that they have like some guys who play that more playoff style, like PLD, and even a guy like Scheifele, if he chooses to like play with the knuckles, he's a great playoff type player. but I don't see them having enough to get by Edmonton, especially given the fact that they have the looming Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, where it feels like he's just going to sign for Montreal as soon as July 1st rolls around. And I think at some point that dysfunction catches up to you. I don't think it's a last ride type scenario at all. And I think because that Edmonton dismantles Winnipeg in round two.
Yes, I have to go. I agree with you there. I mean, I guess we'll see if Hellebuck is the sole reason why Winnipeg gets by Vegas, and it
If he's
maybe,
rolling, that's true. He could
yeah,
steal some
if he's
games.
rolling, maybe it turns into they do what the 04-05 Oilers did, and what's it, Rolson, Dwayne
Dwayne
Rolson,
Rollison, yeah.
yeah,
Dwayne
Dwayne
Rollison
Rolson
catching
just
an
stands
absolute
on his
fire.
head and nearly wins a Stanley Cup almost single handedly. So we're gonna take the Oilers here. Yeah, we're both taking the Oilers. Going to the conference finals. Let's go back to I think we have Dallas and I have Seattle. I think Seattle will eventually knock off Colorado. I think I'm worried. They seem like a team that one of these Stanley Cup champions that just doesn't get back that next year because they took a team for granted. So if you're telling me that Dallas comes back and rights the ship, I'd probably take Dallas over Seattle in that instance. Just I think a more talented team all around
Just
there.
too much depth. And like like they lost John Klingberg, Dallas, and John Klingberg was like a steady 50-point defenseman and right-handed and like didn't miss a beat. Like they've almost felt like they've gotten better with the basically offensive eruption from Jason Robertson. And like they're a team that's done a great job transitioning with realistically only one top five pick and Miro Heiskanen, and then Jake Ottinger, who is their goaltender. He's fantastic. He was a first round pick as well. But you look at a guy like Ropa Hintze, I believe he was the second or third round pick. Jason Robertson, I know for a fact, was a second round pick. And this is a team, they're very, very deep. And I actually have them beating the reigning champs, Alex, in round two, because I know we had our differences in Colorado versus Seattle, but I have Dallas beating Colorado in round two because, like I said, to complete a team, I think Jason Robertson figures it out. He's one of the best goal scorers at 5-on-5. And like I said, I think they take down the reigning champs. So we will have a new cup champion this season.
So yeah, now looking at a conference finals, we both got we both got the Stars and Oilers there. Can Connor McDavid break through and play in the Stanley Cup Finals? Like, McKinnon got there last year. He's probably, I guess, in terms of centerman, the guy that people most compare to McDavid. Fair run, fair to McKinnon. So, is it because it felt like the Oilers should have gotten there last year when they had the chance to do it, and
Like I said, felt like
Colorado dismantled them.
It felt like it, especially given the fact that, like, with that, still Connor McDavid led the playoffs in scoring. And see, like, there's just something about Edmonton. I don't think they're deep enough, and I think Dallas actually wins that conference final and is your Western Conference representative in the Stanley Cup. I just think Edmonton, despite the fact that Connor McDavid's going to score a shitload of points, and even Leon Draisaitl, like last year, he was playing on one leg. The guy was second in playoff scoring, and wild too. And he was like, you could tell he's blatantly stationary, and he still was putting up points like no other. And it just, with Edmonton, it just feels like they don't have enough yet on the defensive end. And kind of similarly to Las Vegas, like, except just because of the results with Stuart Skinner, it hasn't gotten as much notoriety. But Edmonton's down to, I believe, what is now their third string goalie to start the year in Stuart Skinner. Don't get me wrong, he's been fantastic this year, but I have a hard time trusting him to lead them to a Stanley Cup or even just to the final. And I don't get me wrong, I think he's a young player and I think he could develop into that guy, but this is his very first playoff run. And I think he's just going to have to figure that out. And because of that, I think Dallas ultimately comes out on top, especially with Jake Ottinger giving them the advantage in that. Alex, who do you have as your Western Conference finalist or Western Conference representative, I should say?
I'm trying to think if I had Edmonton, or I'll have to go back and check the tape. I think I picked Edmonton to win the West last year. I picked either Edmonton or the Colorado. I think from the start.
I think it was you. I think you had Colorado because I'm pretty sure you picked Colorado to win the whole thing.
Yeah, so that was probably it. I And I know hockey's just so different than it. Hockey's closer to baseball, just in terms of like the baked in parody that the game creates. So it's not like basketball where you don't want to play the other team when the best player in the league is on the other team. It's hard for me to pick against McDavid, and now that Draisaitl's at least a little healthy to take some of that scoring load off him, it's kind of hard for me to go against the best player. I know Dallas may be the best team, but I think if McDavid is as singularly great as he is, or as everyone believes
As he
him to
can
be,
be. Yeah, as he can be.
uh, who knows? Maybe it's just one of those special runs.
It's I was saying this to a friend too, Alex. Like at like another friend off air. Like at some point, Connor McDavid's going to score like 48 points in a playoff run, and that is enough goals to get it done. At some point, that's enough goals to win you a Stanley Cup. So it's like it's not a bad bet to make it all, my man. And I had a really tough time debating this one too. I just felt Dallas is a team that's kind of like still has the components that have been there before, but just a bit deeper with the younger core. But I like that we're differing here. You got Edmonton, I got
right, and
Dallas.
like because they just lost Pavelski, went down.
A little scary.
Yeah,
But
yeah, scary injury for sure. And dude, was that hit dirty, John?
no. Hard hit, but not a dirty hit. And it's one that's scary because Joe Pavelski's been in a few of these incidents before where he's gotten just quite frankly crushed, and he's not a big guy to begin with. And so you're definitely like thoughts are out with him and hope he gets better soon. But yeah, like that was a scary incident, but crushing hit by Matt Dumba, man, crushing hit.
And no one's ever trusted Tyler Seguin to come up clutch. So uh,
he wasn't bad playing on one hip in that last Stanley Cup run.
I didn't realize he was that injured.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break on GNASS. John will be back for more puck takes, and he'll break down the East for us. So don't flinch and don't move an inch. There's more GNASS coming your way. And we're back with the GNASS NHL playoff preview show. If you missed the last section, John has the Stars coming out of the West, and I'm going with Connor McDavid and the Oil to finally break through and represent the West in the Stanley Cup Finals. John, let's shift gears to the Eastern Conference, where just looking at these teams and all the success that they've had this season, there's 5 teams here that legitimately feel like they have a chance at winning this thing.
Yeah, 5 or 6 for sure. I mean, it felt like, especially at the trade deadline, that everyone making a trade was out east, with the exception of maybe like LA and Vegas. And actually, Edmonton, I guess they got Matthias Ekholm. But all the big trades, it felt like were happening out east, like Timo Meier going to New Jersey, Kane and Tarasenko going to the Rangers, Boston getting Bertuzzi and Orlov, Toronto basically turning over like a third of the roster, and even Tampa Bay trading an entire draft's worth of picks for Tanner Jeannot. And it just felt like a complete arms race out east. And, it's been absolutely wild to watch. But, I mean, we got some good playoff series because of that, Alex. Where do you want to start this one?
Right. So you mentioned in your Substack piece on the GNAS Substack, of course, everyone out here better be subscribing to it. But so we have the return of the Hudson rivalry, a great rivalry in the 90s, Rangers, Devils, got re-sparked a little bit to be the first half of the 2010s.
Yes.
But to me, it feels like the Rangers, at least on paper, their roster, it feels like they might be the most balanced roster top to bottom. And then you mentioned Kane and Tarasenko just to put them over the top. And I really like the Rangers.
It's a good team to like, man. Last season's Eastern Conference finalists, they added Tarasenko and Kane, as you mentioned. Like both players, by the way, Stanley Cup champions, both productive players on their runs. The Rangers feel like a team that's really primed to make a deep run. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Devils are fun to watch. They're high flying, super athletic, but one thing nobody wants to say, man, is young teams don't win in hockey, and the Devils are a young team. And we've seen this story before. The high flying team that plays with the high octane offense ends up running into a more experienced team, one that plays maybe a little bit more physically, one that's a little bit more veteran grizzled. And that's sort of the end of their season. And that's exactly what I think happens to the Devils, unfortunately. But I think it will be a high flying, high scoring 7-game series in the process. And even though the Devils got a little bit overwhelmed in game one, I think they're going to come back in game two. And I think this is going to ultimately be a long series that the Rangers win. Alex, how you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I'm probably right there with you. You mentioned the firepower that the Devils have. I just I think the Rangers will take care of business. Maybe it doesn't go seven, but I think yeah, we're looking at least a long series, high scoring. Maybe probably 6 games.
There you go, buddy. So we both got the Rangers winning this one though, and it's just like despite the fact that like the Devils have Nico Hischier stepping up, Jack Hughes, like Timo Meyer, it's so hard to bet against like the Eastern Conference finalists with Patrick Kane and Vlad Tarasenko. And shout
Yeah,
out
yeah,
Adam
yeah.
Fox,
Both
four
have
assists
been there, done that. For
exactly,
sure.
and shout out Adam Fox, four assists in game one, by the way.
Yeah, so
uh,
that goes back to my point. Yeah, I just think they're so balanced. Blue line forwards. Then it's
fantastic team.
yeah, I really like that team. So yeah, the other side of the metropolitan bracket, we get the Islanders and the Hartford Whalers. John, I refuse to acknowledge
That's totally fine, man.
relocated franchises. So John, Islanders, there was some Barzell had the health was a question mark. He got up for game one. Carolina, it took care of business. Do we think the Whalers are going to pull this one out? I think there were a lot of people's sneaky Stanley Cup pick to come out of the East. I think.
I think for sure to enter the year, like Carolina is just such a good team. They're they were the team that added everyone for free, like Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty. For those who forgot, so if you're like, oh, why didn't they make any big like trade deadline pickups? Like that was mostly why. Carolina is just a great team, and they're gonna outshoot you. They're gonna outskate you. Jake Slavin is the most underrated defenseman in hockey, and the problem with this series is New York makes like the Islanders make everything competitive. They turn every game into a slug. They're an old school playoff team that's going to trap you, beat you down. They don't care if they get outshot. They're just here to block shots and grind. And we saw it in game one. Carolina only won 2-1. I think Carolina is going to win this series, but I think New York Islanders are going to take their pound of flesh in the process.
Yeah, but make it a tractor pull in the process. And so I agree with you on that the Whalers are going to take this series. But like you mentioned, if the Islanders do make this into a very very big like a big boy series, if you will, I think that's probably going to diminish the Whalers when they have to play a team like the Rangers in the second round.
Exactly. And I think it's one of those series that even if it goes 5 games, like New York is going to make sure like you leave those 5 games like battered. like, and it's going to be they're the one team that I have circled if you're out east that like entering the playoffs it was like I don't want to play these guys because if we lose they're going to make sure that we lose the next round most likely as well.
Sorry, because we don't have the records in front of us. Who'd have home ice in that? Would that be
between between Carolina and New York?
Yeah.
Carolina.
Carolina. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and that is a tough place to play. So maybe that'd be another long series, but
Hurricanes fans are pretty awesome.
I feel like like the Bruins played in Carolina, the home team won every game last year, and obviously the Carolina won that series. But I feel like the Rangers could at least steal. Like they have the team that is capable of stealing a game on the road that they need to have.
Alex, what do you always say when it's a tie between both teams? You give the edge to the goaltender, right? There's nobody more talented. Well, I mean, you could argue Andrei Vasilevsky, but I'd argue besides Igor Shesterkin, there's a very, very small list that's more talented than him. And look, Carolina's been a fantastic team. And I'm just looking at the goalie's names. I forget how to pronounce it. It's another Russian goalie, but it's Pyotr. Actually, he's not Russian. I believe he's Czech, but it's Pyotr Kochetkov. He's been fantastic this year. Oh no, he's Russian. Never mind. But anyway, fantastic goalie this year, but kind of like solidifying Carolina when Freddie Anderson hasn't been able to pick up the slack. But I think this is where the Rangers are going to separate themselves and ultimately win the series. I think Igor Shesterkin in a short, not short, in a low scoring game, he's able to ultimately give New York the edge. And I have actually New York winning between them and Carolina.
Me too. Give me up.
Yeah.
Rangers over Whalers.
I also think this is the series too, like in the second round where we see our first Patrick Kane moment for the New York Rangers. like I think that the first series is going to be more.
One's coming.
Exactly. I think the first series is going to be more the depth overwhelms them. I think the second series is going to be Patrick Kane takes center stage.
And yeah, we'll shift our gears to the Atlantic, near and dear to your heart, John. But first, we have to talk about the record-setting team in hockey, and that was the Boston Bruins, trying to avoid the disappointment that the Tampa Bay Lightning endured when they got swept out of the playoffs a couple years ago after first setting this record.
Well,
Bruins got off
positive.
to
Yeah, I was gonna say positives after one game is they don't have to worry about that.
yes, I think the Bruins are over. They're going to overmatch this Florida team. I mean, you're telling me they don't have their best forward in the lineup. I don't think the Bruins played their best game by any stretch, but it was certainly more than enough. And David Pastrnak did David Pastrnak things. Just scored a bunch of goals, and the Bruins get the win. Even if they're somewhat hobbled with this illness going around the locker room, I can't see this going more than 6 games.
I think it's going to go less than that. I actually think this is going to be the most one-sided series in the first round. I'm sure that if you go and look at hockey playoff previews, we will not be the first show that said that either. This is going to be an absolute slaughtering. Florida is limping into the playoffs. They're on their third string goalie. This has all the makings of a Bruins sweep. Now, I think Florida has enough talent to take one game off Boston, but I really think this is Bruins in 4 or 5, and I think it's quick work for the Bruins as well.
All right, so we got the Bruins moving on. So, John, we touched on this off the top. Not exactly the showing you'd like to see out of your Maple Leafs in Game 1 with
Yeah, it was tough to watch.
about 2 decades worth of playoff utility.
We're getting close to it. Yeah,
weighing down on those sweaters up in Toronto. What was your reaction watching that game, and what do you need to see in Game 2 out of your Maple Leafs?
it was tough to watch Game 1, man. Like, I still think they're going to come out on top in this series, which is really alarming. And like I do have them winning this series. I don't want to bend from my pre-playoff prediction, but watching them come out that way in Game 1 was tough to watch. The only silver lining there is that they've generally played Game 1 extraordinarily poorly in this era of the Maple Leafs. So if you think that's like, high up on the scale of embarrassment, it's not. They're 2-5 in these Game 1s. They generally get mollywopped. So that's the only silver lining here. That is how bad this team was. From top to bottom, it was a brutal game to watch. The defense was awful. Everyone was making bad decisions. It felt like they were playing hot potato with the puck. Samsonov led in 2 weak goals. And the big story of Game 1 was how Tampa Bay clowned Michael Bunting and got him kicked out of the game. And he's going to be suspended for Game 2. So the positives are at least Toronto doesn't have to worry about that. Matthew Knies
Addition by subtraction?
What's up?
Addition by subtraction?
And I wouldn't say that well, it depends on how much of Bunting's head he's going to lose. Like he's trending dangerously to Kadri territory because of like the reputation he has with the referees right now. But we'll see. I think Bunting actually has more to offer. Like in terms of if Bunting can just shut the fuck up, he's a fantastically effective player. And Tampa did a great job knowing that if you can get him to go at the refs and keep trying to draw penalties, he will single-handedly lose Toronto the game. And not that he lost Toronto the game, but he was the reason that there was no reason that like they had no chance of coming back with that 5-minute major. And it's a tough looking Game 1. So let's move on from there. I mean, Tampa is the 2-time defending champs, but I think Toronto wins the series. And the reason why is Tampa's reeling, Tampa's hurting. They lost 2 defensemen in Game 1 and 1 forward in Game 1. The 2 defensemen, by the way, Victor Hedman and Eric Cernak. So every Leaf
those
forward,
are big losses.
Yeah, every Leaf forward, finish your goddamn checks and you'll win this series. That's the silver lining, and that's it. Like they have to come out hard. They have to not worry about really everything that's going to be written about them between now and puck drop tomorrow, and they'll be fine. And I personally think that this team is built to endure that. I mean, they have the leadership in the locker room. They should be able to come out on top in this one.
So kind of like we talked about the Jets in Vegas and how Hellebuck could theoretically stand on his head and steal this series. We don't think Vasilevsky's capable of doing that against the Maple Leafs?
Oh, it's not that he isn't capable of doing that. I think that if Tampa is this shorthanded, this should be the Leafs series to lose, but we've seen that story before and they've lost it. So it's definitely not going to be a short series. I think this one goes 6 or 7. And like I
I
said,
feel like
Alex,
if it gets to game 7,
if it
we
gets to
talked
game
about
seven,
this.
I think it's over for the Leafs. But I
Home
do.
like home ice can work against teams if and we talked about this last year when the Leafs, deja vu. We talked about this last year. That home ice advantage really works against you if you let in that first goal. And I think Tampa got out to a 2-0 lead in that game 7 last
One,
year.
not just that in this game, for example, you just bring that up. Like Tampa was up 1-0 like a minute into the game, and that's like from the start to finish. Like this was not a good game for the Leafs. And the good news is everything they did in this game is what not to do in game 2. So it should be an easy fix if you think about it. Just don't do any of the shit you did in game 1, right? But it's like I said, it's tough to pick the Maple Leafs, but I think they can come out on top. I think this is the
You
year
only got
that
to be
they
right once to break the streak,
exactly.
John. And I find myself siding with you here. You raise good points about Tampa's injuries, and they've played a lot of hockey in the last 4 years. A lot of
A
hockey, a lot
lot,
more than
lot.
everyone else. That has to catch up with them at some point. And unfortunately, I think the Maple Leafs, maybe there's a psychological thing that they have to reconcile before game 2, because going down 2-0 to Tampa, that will put a lot of wind in their sails. So I think if they get past that psychological thing, they come back in game 2, even the series. I think that should at least give them something to build on. I think there was maybe the team was a little bit deflated because it kind of felt like, at least, with that, I can't say with the Ryan O'Reilly trade, but at least coming into this season, it felt like the Maple Leafs, it was their year to get on top of this division and not have to draw Tampa in that first
It
round.
it really did, and it felt like because of like they weren't able to get the show together. And like I get that Boston was a record-breaking team, but Toronto really, even from the get-go, never really got their shit together. And the reality is this team's been waiting for this series, like for the playoffs, not necessarily Tampa, but round one. And the bar has been so low for them. So one of these years, they just have to accept that, look, guys, it's on us. We just got to get it done. No excuses. And we don't want to hear it was the refs. We don't want to hear it was this and that. And like I said, I still think Toronto can come out on top in this series. But Alex, what say you? You have Toronto in
Yeah,
6?
I'm going to take Toronto here. We just got to be right once, John. And so that means we're in complete agreement across the first round of the Eastern Conference here.
It's hard to pick against those teams. That's the biggest problem with
Let's
the
come
East.
back. We're going to come back to Leafs Bruins. Let's go back to the Metropolitan Division. We got Rangers, Carolina, Rangers, and the Whalers in that next round. I'm taking the Rangers over the Whalers, and I really think, they're going to be in that Eastern Conference Finals.
I agree. I think that Carolina, much like it's ironic because a lot of people talk about the Leaf struggles. Carolina has a very similar problem with round 2 and getting over the hump. And I just think like the Rangers, to your point, they're too deep. They have the edge in goaltending. And like I said, I think round 2 is where we see our first Patrick Kane moment, him cementing that first ballot Hall of Fame career. And that's, like I said, like that's how it's going to go. That's how I think it's going to go. And there you go. Rangers in the conference finals, back-to-back seasons. How about that, Rangers fans?
So Boston, Toronto, this time in the second round. And
Torturous hell.
as someone who, again, I'm not a Bruins fan. I mean, I do consume the team like through osmosis, and I was watching, most of the game the other night. I think the Bruins could be very much poised for a letdown here. This is the team that you've owned and that you've owned their ass in the playoffs, but they finally broke through and they got that first round monkey off their back. So maybe that loosens the Leafs up and they can play free and easy. I like the talent, at least certainly in the forward core. I like the Leafs talent a lot more than the Bruins. And I don't know how the Bruins have done it this year. It's smoke, it's mirrors. It could be just like this overwhelming depth and this confidence.
Very, very high PDO. Very, very high PDO, aka they're getting a lot of bounces.
Right. Like, because other than Patrice Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak, I don't view anyone else on the Bruins as an elite offensive player.
No, that's fair. Well,
Taylor Hall's taking a real nosedive in terms of what he brings to the eye and what he brings offensively these days.
The Bruins are deep, and I love the defense that they have. Like I love the Orlov, McAvoy, Lindholm, and Carlo top four. Like I think that's one of the most terrifying top fours in all of hockey. This is my toughest series to pick, Boston Toronto. It's because of all the history there. And to your point, like it would be a great story for Toronto to come out and beat Boston and just finally have those demons slayed. But just the way that they are mentally, man, I don't think they can do it. Like I honestly think that they have more talent than Boston. I think they might even be the most talented team in the league right now, top to bottom. I think their demons are too much for them. Like I think they have enough to get past one round, but I think when they see that B on the jersey, like it'll be a 7-game series. It always is with Boston. And I think when they step out on the ice in TD Garden in game 7, they're going to wilt. That's what's going to happen. And the positive will be it'll be in round 2 as opposed to round 1. And I think Boston wins that series in 7 games.
So here's the thing, like Boston, for as much as they've owned Toronto's ass for the last 10,
Forever.
15 years in the playoffs. If the Bruins didn't go out and maybe they still get the top seed, but they don't have this record-breaking year, I think that is eventually going to work against them because the Bruins are also a choky playoff franchise, and they sold their soul. Tim Thomas must have sold his soul to the devil to stand on his head for 4 rounds. They survived 3 game 7s when they win in 2011. Otherwise, this team is known for more playoff failure than success. And I just think that if Toronto gets it to game 7, and well, I mean, we've been there before. They were up 3-0 in the third period.
Well, this one different core. This core. The good news, Alex, is this core's so gutless they'll never get up 3-0 in a game 7.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's like, I just think that if Toronto gets that far, you have a chance to settle all family business, and then you're playing on house money in the conference finals and potentially the Stanley Cup finals. I think it gets to game 7. Give me Toronto. I mean, I did this last year. I picked them. I picked them to finally get the monkey off their back, get out of the first round. They couldn't do that. But
it's the bar for this team is so fucking low, and they can't do it, man. It's really alarming. Like that's the only reason I have them not beating Boston in this, but there's something about them where it just feels like whenever they figure out this last demon, I mean, provided that management keeps the group together long enough for them to figure it out, like whatever year they win, they figure out one of these game 7s is going to be the year they just fucking steamroll everyone after that point.
So I think on the continent of North America, Toronto Maple Leafs fans might be the closest thing to the 86-year curse of the Bambino Red Sox experience. And just tortured at the hands of the Yankees for decades, almost a century, since they sold Babe Ruth. Then you lose in 2003 in the most heartbreaking fashion, walk-off home run in Yankee Stadium to Aaron Boone. You come back that next season, you go down 3-0, you storm back, win this, unprecedented playoff series, and then you just steamroll the Cardinals in the World Series. And I think that's on the table if Toronto, if you tell me if they got by Tampa, they win a hard-fought series against the Bruins, like, I think that's on the table. And it's all in front of Toronto, and the only way is through. And so I only got to be right once on this.
Alex, though, that's been the whole problem with this core in Toronto, man. It's you didn't come this far to come this far, and they've just never been able to break through that last minute. It's always been mental too. It's never like a question of skill or like if they've even started to figure out how to play solid game 7s. It's like it's always a question of if they can just get that last hurdle done, and they've just not been able to figure it out. But I agree with you, is one year they are going to figure it out, and when they do, that's going to be the year like look out. Like I said,
that'll all family business.
I have a little sliver that does believe they can do it, but my head is telling me not to pick against Boston in a game 7. But Alex, let's move on to the conference finals in the East, because we have spent a lot of time talking about Boston, Toronto, and for good reason too.
For good reason.
For very good reason. But we both, well, you have Toronto versus New York. I have Boston versus
famous
New York.
last words.
Right. Let's go to you first, buddy. Who do you have winning between Toronto and the New York Rangers?
I like the Rangers. I think
Fair.
they were my Stanley Cup pick. I think at the beginning of the season, I picked the Rangers to go to the Stanley Cup, win it, and then they traded for Tarasenko and Patrick Kane in the middle of the season. At the deadline, I just like that roster too much, top to bottom, and I think it's it's there. Even if the Bruins, if I was to flip flop and take the Bruins, I take the Rangers over the Bruins.
It's funny because I feel like a broken record because last year when we did the playoff breakdown, my takeaway was whoever comes out of the Atlantic is like the best team in the Atlantic is going to represent the East in the Stanley Cup final. And I think it's the same thing here. I think Boston beats New York. I think they're just too much right now. Now, I think New York is going to make this a long series too. And if you're listening to the trend here, I think that's going to be 2 7-game series in a row, just because to your point, Alex, like New York is too good top to bottom to just go down without a fight. And I think they match up so well with the team like Boston, just given the fact of like how they can skate them into the ground. And as much as I love the top four in Boston, New York's New York's not too shabby in that end too. And they're big, they're physical, they can beat you down. And I think it's going to be a bloodbath that Boston wins in 7.
All right, so I got a Rangers Oilers final, and you got a Stars Bruins final, John.
Ooh, I'm glad we differed so much though in that one.
Yeah, we got there in the end. So there was a lot of consensus in between. So John, you're the hockey man. You got to give your Stanley Cup pick.
I feel like this was although I did not have Colorado, I feel like this was along the lines of what I said last year too, which is I feel like a broken record in this, but the team out Atlantic that's the best is going to make it to the final, and the war to get there is just going to dismantle them on the way there, and they're going to lose in the cup final. I think it's going to be a same type story as Tampa last year. I think Boston loses to Dallas in the cup final. I think they're just, when they get there, they're going to be too broken down. They're going to, like every team on their way in the East, like that's how this is, man. They're real contenders. They're going to take their pound of flesh when you beat them. And I think that that's too much for Boston to overcome. And unfortunately, the fairy tale of the greatest team ever ends in the cup final, Alex, very similarly to 17-1. How about you, Alex?
Yeah. Thanks for twisting that knife, John.
I had to do it once, man. You've been doing it all show.
No. That was well played, sir. I'm sticking with my guns here. I took the Rangers at the beginning of the season. I think if they draw Edmonton, I think they're a vastly superior team over the Oilers. And so in that case, yeah, if I'm sticking with that matchup, then Rangers all the way. I don't even think 5-6 games.
Plus, Jake Trouba does have a history of wearing himself like a backpack on Connor McDavid during those series. So if you're ever wondering how New York's going to slow him down, Trouba's just going to, clothesline him, something like that, hold him down, drag him down like it's WWE. So it's good. Not a bad pick either. And yeah. So,
all right. So you heard it here first. Stars or Rangers will win the Stanley Cup.
You know where to put your money, folks. Speaking of money, Alex, let's jump to everyone's favorite segment. It's time for Degenerate's Corner.
Sometimes she goes, sometimes it does. She didn't go. That's the way she goes.
22 black, 22 black. Ass, son of a bitch.
Fucking way she goes, he said.
Oh, no. Why did I bet the company payroll? Oh, Gil's in a lot of trouble.
Can the boys beat the number? We'll find out on Degenerate's Corner.
It's the way she goes, buddy. Fucking way she goes.
So we ran through our NHL playoff preview. Alex, you had the champion coming from New York. I had the champion coming from out west in Dallas. Is your best bet pertaining to hockey?
It is not, because old Alex has been bleeding for a little bit. We didn't. The Heat forgot to show up in the play-in game against the Hawks.
It's okay. The Raptors were absent from their game too, so it's fine.
It shows you. It shows you just how pathetic the Heat's performance is. That the Hawks have not been competitive against the Celtics in the first two playoff games. We're going to the NBA for my best bet. The monopolistic sportsbook operator here in New Hampshire, DraftKings, they offered a nice boost. Real simple. LeBron James over 25 points. That got boosted to plus 100. The number's minus 165 otherwise. So
very nice.
Laying some juice if you want to tail me and you're not able to if DraftKings is not available in your locality. John, what are you doing for your best bet?
I'm going to go straight to the ice for game 2. Dallas Stars money line. Dallas, obviously, as we just talked about, a little bit of a slow start against the Minnesota Wild, so we fully expect them to rebound in Texas game 2. Take Dallas on the money line. That's minus 155 for any of you guys looking.
And John, do we have a parlay or long shot?
I'm going to do some load management because I did 3 best bets last week, or last time we recorded for the NBA playoff preview, and I lost 2 of them. So we will be doing load management this week.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some load management as well. Maybe get on some live betting for some playoff hoops. I
know.
Just try to keep rolling it forward.
Maybe we'll get some good lines, like, after the first periods tonight or something like that as we record. It's April 19th, by the way, as we record.
Yes, on the eve of game 2 in the NHL playoffs. John, as the hockey expert, any final parting thoughts for the hockey listening and or viewing audience?
It should be a fun show if the Leafs lose in game 7.
Then I will have firmly but kindly requested John sequester his belt and shoelaces.
I think we'll be good in that regard, Alex. Too much scar tissue at this point, buddy. Any closing thoughts for our listeners, our viewers, or subscribers?
Subscribe to the Substack. Keep your eyes peeled for the for the guide to hate watching the Red Sox and this interminable slog that will be the next,
I'm excited for that one.
Next 4 or 5 years for this franchise. So we're just getting started.
I'm excited for that one, man. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And like, subscribe, hit the bell. Helps the algorithm, guys.